Hey everyone! A soldering station is an essential part of any electronics hobbyist life. We all started out with the classic old school soldering irons, and over time moved on to the Hakko 900 series stations and all sorts of clones. Technology didn't stand still, and in the second half of the 2010s, stations using T12 tips from Hakko became popular. Our friends, the Chinese, flooded the market with cheap stations using T12 tip clones. They became widespread and very affordable. The T12s had much more power compared to the 900 series and could heat up in just a few seconds. They responded quickly to temperature changes. They're still relevant today, but nowadays the most popular are JBC cartridges, like the 210 and 245 types. The first option is the most versatile and suitable for most tasks. The second one has increased supply voltage and power up to 150 watts. It's designed for soldering large metal parts. There's also a tiny Precision 115 cartridge, as well as an ultra-powerful 470, which can handle anything. On this channel, I've shown you simple designs for analog soldering stations for 900 and T12 tips more than once. But at different times, I've also developed various stations for 210 type cartridges, as well as digital soldering stations. Over time, of course, I'll release videos on those topics too. But today, I'll show you another quick and dirty project, an analog soldering station for T12 cartridges. But if you want, this station can also work with the previously mentioned JBC cartridges. Again, I totally get that these days it's easier to just buy things instead of making them yourself. But I'm glad there are still people out there who keep thinking, creating, and making things. Anyone can be a consumer. Many DIY projects don't make sense financially, as buying something ready-made is often cheaper. But the result matters less in the process, and the deep satisfaction we get when something we built ourselves comes to life. Let's get back to our station. Of course, it's hard to call this device a full-fledged station since it doesn't have a hot air gun or all those extra bells and whistles that modern stations come with. But believe me, when it comes to soldering capabilities, our device is just as good as the Chinese stations, and in some ways even better, since all the controls are analog and the feedback response to temperature changes is lightning fast. The entire design is built on a single printed circuit board, which was ordered from our sponsor, Next PCB. The board measures 95 by 89 millimeters to keep costs low. Next PCB is one of the leading companies in manufacturing high-quality printed circuit boards of any complexity and size. From simple single-sided boards to the most complex multi-layer boards, up to 32 layers. Flexible printed circuit boards, boards with aluminum, copper, or ceramic bases. Convenient options help you get boards for any task, all in compliance with international standards. Just upload your original Gerber files, select the necessary options, pay, and that's it. A wide selection of solder mask colors, board thicknesses, and trace finishes. Whether it's tan or gold, any whim for your movie. On top of that, the company also assembles boards and can provide high-quality electronic components, whether you have a small-scale production or a large enterprise. Next, PCB works with the world's largest brands, and it's possible that the printed circuit boards in your smartphone, TV, or car were made by this very company. The prices are very affordable, ultra-fast production times, quick and convenient payment, and delivery options. You'll find the link to Next PCB in the description. In the video description, you'll find an archive with the schematic and Gerber files for the PCB in case you decide to recreate this project. The board has milled sections in many places to prevent arcing. The power supply is located away from the low voltage section and a safe distance is maintained between the traces. So everything is done just right. A few words about the circuit. This is an analog temperature stabilizer built on a dual operational amplifier LM358. The design includes a 7085 linear regulator, which provides a reduced voltage of 5 volts for the control system. The heater itself is powered by either 12 or 24 volts, depending on the type of cartridge used. This same regulator serves as the reference voltage source for our temperature stabilizer. The first channel of the operational amplifier is used to build a comparison unit. The reference voltage is applied to the inverting input, and we have the ability to adjust this voltage by turning the variable resistor. This leads to a change in the temperature at the tip of the soldering iron. The direct input of the same channel receives the voltage from the thermocouple, which is compared to the reference voltage. It's important to note here that both the set reference voltage and the signal from the thermocouple are very small, ranging from a few millivolts to several dozen millivolts. Diode VD1 serves as a voltage limiter at the input of the operational amplifier. When measuring the voltage from the thermocouple, it remains off and does not affect the measured signal. If the thermocouple voltage is higher than the reference, the output of the first channel will be at a high level. A Schmitt trigger is assembled on the second channel of the operational amplifier. In this state, the inverting input is pulled up to the power supply and also receives a control signal from the first channel through the specified circuit. If the voltage at the second input of this channel is lower than the voltage at the other input, which is exactly our case when the tip is overheated, the output of this channel will be at a low level. In this case, the low power transistor is off since it is of the NPN type. Consequently, the power P-channel MOSFET remains off, as its gate is pulled up to the positive supply through a resistor. The heater's turned off, and the tip is cooling down. In this design, the signal from the thermocouple is taken precisely during the pause when the transistor is off. This is purely the thermocouple's own EMF. In this state, the thermocouple generates a certain voltage, which is compared to the reference voltage. As it cools down, the voltage from the thermocouple decreases. As soon as the voltage from the thermocouple drops below the reference, the output of the first channel switches to the opposite state. Through diode VD2, this causes a shift in the potential at the inverting input of the second channel, which leads to its switching. A small transistor is triggered, pulling the gate of the power switch to ground. As a result, the MOSFET turns on and heating begins. So how does the MOSFET turn off? When it's on, the voltage at its drain is high. This voltage, through a resistor, goes to the non-inverting input of the first channel, where it is still compared to the reference voltage. This resistor limits the current, and the diode prevents excessive voltage from forming at the input by clamping it at about 0.6 to 0.7 volts. This voltage is clearly higher than the reference. A high level is set at the output of this channel, which leads to a low level at the output of the second channel and turns off the power switch. At this moment, during the pause, the system monitors only the EMF from the thermocouple, waiting until the tip cools down to the set threshold, and then it starts heating again. In other words, the heating isn't constant, but pulsed, which ensures a fast feedback response, prevents significant overshoot, and maintains a certain hysteresis. As they say, all genius things are simple. A properly assembled control circuit works right away. Fine-tuning is limited to selecting a pair of resistors that set the temperature limit. Regarding the power supply, to keep things as simple as possible, I used a chip from the top switch family. It only has 3 pins, comes in a TO220 package, and requires a minimum of external components. Which specific chip you choose depends on your needs. The most powerful one in this particular line is the top 227. The power supply is built using a single-ended flyback topology. It features output voltage stabilization, short circuit protection, and a bunch of other protections integrated right into the chip itself. The output voltage is set by a Zener diode. If you need, for example, 24 volts at the output, you use a Zener diode rated for 22 to 23 volts. To this voltage, you add a little over 1 volt of voltage drop across the optocoupler's LED, so the final output voltage will be around 24 to 25 volts. The transformer, or more accurately in this topology, the multi-winding choke, is wound on a ferrite core. Its design is calculated using special formulas or software. Of course, depending on the requirements, the size of the non-magnetic gap between the halves of the core and the size of the magnetic core itself, the winding specifications will vary. So I don't really see much point in giving the exact parameters of my transformer. It's important to keep in mind that the chip operates at a fixed frequency, and the resistance of the channel in its integrated power switch varies depending on the specific chip you choose. All these parameters are necessary for calculating the transformer. Almost my entire power supply circuit is taken from the technical documentation for this chip. Except for the snubber section, I used the classic RCD clamp. The power components, which are the top switch chip and the diode assembly, are mounted on a common heatsink using thermally conductive insulating pads and plastic bushings. The power switch itself, which controls the heater, stays almost completely cool during operation and doesn't need any extra cooling. Now, about connecting the cartridges. With the T12, it's really simple. The cartridge pinout is right in front of you now. It's important not to mix up the polarity when connecting, otherwise the cartridge could burn out. After connecting the cartridge, set the regulator to the minimum temperature and watch the heating LED to see how it works. When it's cooling down, it's off. As it heats up during operation, it starts to flicker, and that's completely normal. Next, you can dip the tip of the iron into water and you'll see the LED stay on continuously. Actually, once again, the heating is happening in pulses. It's just that the frequency of these pulses is so high that it looks like the LED is glowing steadily. After checking the feedback response, the board is ready for further steps. Now, regarding working with JBC cartridges, again, this circuit wasn't originally designed for these cartridges, but if you want, you can use them too. However, the connection isn't exactly standard. The pinout for the standard 210 cartridge is shown here. Unlike the T12, which only has 2 pins, the 210 has 3. There's also a pin for the midpoint connection between the thermocouple and the heater. We only need the 2 outermost pins. One of them, the very edge pin, is the thermocouple plus, and the other goes to the heater. So we end up with the same connection as with the T12. I'm ignoring the middle pin that goes to the cartridge body. The exact same connection method is used for the more powerful 245 cartridges. The nuance is that with the 210, the power supply is lower, about 12 volts, while the 245 uses 24. For the tiny 115 cartridges, the power supply is around 9 to 10 volts. And of course, you need to take into account the capabilities of your power source. Even a 227 chip might not be enough to fully power the 245 tips, since during heat up or under heavy load, they can draw more than 150 watts. In this case, you either need to use a more powerful power supply or lower the supply voltage, thereby reducing the tip's power. Next, I decided to put everything into a case. I could have quickly modeled and printed one, but then I remembered a case I had printed earlier, which has been lying around unused for a couple of years now. I found that exact model online on a popular website, and if you're interested, you'll find the link in the description. Of course, it's not the right size, and installing my board isn't exactly straightforward either, but it's well made, so I decided to use it. In my opinion, the finished build actually looks really nice. Now, about the kests. The worst part is that I have a lot of cartridges like T12, 115, 210, and even the massive 245. But I don't have any handles for them, since I recently sold my last station that used these tips in order to upgrade. I still have the cartridges, but no handles, just some portable soldering irons. So sorry about that. The setup will be incomplete for now, but I've already ordered the handles since I plan to use this DIY project for at least the next couple of months. But overall, in terms of soldering performance, everything is great, especially if you use the 210 cartridges so you don't run into any power supply issues. With the T12s, there are no issues at all, except that they're already outdated. The only thing you need to do is calibrate the temperature and make a small analog scale. And I've already shown how to do that in one of my older videos. You'll find the link in the description. Again, please don't judge too harshly. This is a simple and budget-friendly soldering station, and if you support this video with a comment, I'll show you some designs for more advanced DIY stations. And with that, this video is coming to its logical conclusion. Just a reminder, you'll find all the useful information, including the complete project archive with the board and schematic, in the description below this video. That's all from me. As always, this was Cassian aka with you. See you next time. Bye.